Are you ready to unlock the true potential of your body and mind? Introducing Analemma Coherent Water, a revolutionary new way to improve your health and well-being. Analemma has been clinically proven to significantly increase ATP levels. These are the mitochondrial energy of your body. It significantly improves your gut health by improving the state of your microbiome and provides up to 12 years of biological age rejuvenation within 3 months of drinking this water. Imagine having more energy, a healthier gut, a clearer mind, and a youthful body. With Analemma water, it all stops being a dream. Take the first step towards unlocking your true potential. Try Analemma water and revolutionize your life. Visit coherent-water.com. Every purchase comes with a 100% money-back guarantee. You can literally taste the difference risk-free. Go to coherent-water.com. Don't forget to put in the code GENIUS10 to get some money off. Join the water revolution. Again, go to coherent-water.com and put in the code GENIUS10 for a discount.
Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers, because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button, and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and working on a product to help people overcome these problems, because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Dr. Joanna Sadler. She's a Chancellor's Fellow at University of Edinburgh. She obtained an MS Master's in Chemistry from the University of Bristol in 2013, and then a Ph.D. in biocatalysis and organic chemistry, part of the University of Strathclyde in 2017. This happened, and then she had postdoctoral positions at University of Manchester, University of St. Andrews. We're going to talk today about her work with plastic degradation and what's called upcycling, and the role of fungus and bacteria, hopefully to eat some plastic waste. So, Joanna, thank you for coming.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
If you would, tell me a bit about your previous research and how it led in this direction to what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned in the introduction, I have a background in chemistry. So I've always thought about science from quite a sort of chemical perspective. And in particular, I'm very interested in ways that we can make industrial chemicals in a more sustainable way. So it turns out that about 12% of all petrochemicals, fossil fuel resources, so oil and gas, namely, actually goes into chemical manufacture. And quite often this is through quite unsustainable practices. So, harsh conditions and sustainable catalysts and solvents. So a long-standing interest of mine, which really started in my undergraduate degree, is how can we make industrially important chemicals more sustainably? So I used to come at this from a chemical perspective, and during my undergraduate degree, I did a year in a process chemistry department of a pharmaceutical company, and that got me thinking about this problem. And then I got involved in working in biocatalysis as part of my PhD, and I opened my eyes to this huge and growing field of biocatalysis and actually also synthetic biology. So this idea that we can actually harness the inherent sustainable chemistry properties of microorganisms and build de novo pathways to actually make chemicals sustainably at room temperature from bio-based materials in a very selective manner. And this was an extremely exciting prospect for me. And so I then went about sort of trying to equip myself with the skills that I would need to actually pursue an independent career in this field. And that's what I did with my postdoctoral research. And then I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to start my own independent research, really pioneering this field of taking waste and upcycling value chemicals.
Oh, so you were in the field of creating chemicals from biological processes, and now you're in the field of breaking them down and reusing them. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I guess so. That's one way you could think about it. I think of myself as I used to be in the field of making molecules from some other chemicals, so turning one chemical into another. And now I think of it as those chemicals now deriving from sort of post-consumer waste feedstocks. So I'm still turning one molecule into another molecule, essentially, but it just so happens that those starter molecules are now big polymer chains. We've got to first degrade them as well.
Well, what kind of chemicals did you use to produce from biological processes? What's some examples of your previous research?
So my PhD research was very much focused around the enzyme which is involved in the final biosynthetic step of an antibiotic. So an antibiotic called novobiocin, which is made by Streptomyces. And I was very interested in how this carbon-carbon bond was being formed. So I was basically making sort of antibiotic-like molecules using biocatalysis from starting materials that I had chemically synthesized from sort of commercially available building blocks. And that was to really study the enzyme and to think, what can we understand the enzyme, and then can we perhaps engineer it so that it could accept other substrates, so you can start to diversify the kind of carbon-carbon bonds that you can build, which makes it, it helps it be a more useful tool in synthetic chemistry that could be applied to a wider range of molecules.
Okay, so what kind of compounds did you create, and again, what processes? Do you have an example of one? Was there a bacteria that helped you make a different one? I mean, what are some details of the process that you can give without going too deep?
Of my PhD work?
Yeah, maybe just like a quick snippet of, you said you were able to synthesize one last molecule on a chain of an antibiotic.
Yeah, so the antibiotic was novobiocin, and we synthesized, so it's one chemical step removed from novobiocin. So novobiocin is a coumarin, right, which has got a methyl group at the 7 position, and we synthesized that methylated coumarin ring. But the final antibiotic actually has an additional sugar motif on it. We didn't do that final step. The point wasn't really making the antibiotic. The point of this was to study the enzyme which does this key methylation step.
Okay, gotcha. So we mentioned upcycling. I know people are familiar with recycling, but what is upcycling, just in case people don't know?
Yeah, and so upcycling is the idea of taking a post-consumer product, and whereas recycling would be repurposing it into something of roughly equal value to the first generation material, upcycling is the idea of transforming it into something of higher value than the original material. So in the case of what we studied, we were interested in upcycling waste PET, which is actually not very valuable. I mean, PET can be recycled, but the products tend to be of a lower quality and therefore lower value than the first generation material. So it's actually quite difficult to get something that has a higher value than the product, than the material.
Right, and PET is polyethyl terephthalate. It's a common plastic, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Okay, so usually it can't be upcycled or even recycled. It gets downcycled. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. So quite often it's incorporated into, for example, or it is recycled into second generation PET materials. So in the UK, a lot of milk bottles are actually made from recycled PET. And it's a lower quality material. It has slightly less advantageous properties in terms of gas permeability and melting temperature, etc., the percentage crystallinity. But it is still a useful material for some applications. For the number of applications, it can be used to the virgin polymer, which is a higher quality material. So what I was interested in doing is saying, okay, instead of turning it into something that is less useful and less valuable, can we actually turn it into something that is more valuable than the starting material? And that's what we did. We converted it into phenolin.
Well, how do you do that? Why were you able to do that? Most people can't. What process did you use?
So what we did was we engineered an E. coli to express a series of enzymes which would chemically transform the degradation product of PET into vanillin. So first we had to degrade the polymer chain. So to do this, we used an enzyme which is a leaf branch compost cutanase, and this is an engineered variant of a naturally occurring cutanase which is able to hydrolyze polymer, specifically PET chains. And so this operated at 70 degrees. So we first treated the polymer with this enzyme at 70 degrees. This releases terephthalic acid and ethylene glycol as the 2 major degradation products. And we were particularly interested in the terephthalic acid. So what we did is we had a series of enzymes which could first convert that terephthalic acid into a key intermediate, which is called protocatechoic acid, or protocatechoate, or PC for short. And then another enzyme which would methylate that PC into vanillic acid, And then finally, an enzyme which would reduce the vanillic acid into vanillin, which is an aldehyde. So we had a series of reactions starting from terephthalic acid, eventually getting through to vanillin. And what we did was we expressed all of these enzymes simultaneously inside a single E. coli cell. And this E. coli cell had previously been engineered to accumulate these aromatic aldehydes. So most E. coli actually natively expresses enzymes which would reduce aldehyde bonds. And so if we'd done it in most E. coli strains, we would have got phenyl alcohol, which is to reduce aldehyde. What we wanted to do was to accumulate the aldehyde. So we used this strain which had reductases knocked out. Indeed, we were able to get the aldehyde. We didn't detect any of the alcohol.
Are you ready to unlock the true potential of your body and mind? Introducing Analemma Coherent Water, a revolutionary new way to improve your health and well-being. Analemma has been clinically proven to significantly increase ATP levels. These are the mitochondrial energy of your body. It significantly improves your gut health by improving the state of your microbiome and provides up to 12 years of biological age rejuvenation within 3 months of drinking this water. Imagine having more energy, a healthier gut, a clearer mind, and a youthful body. With Analemma water, it all stops being a dream. Take the first step towards unlocking your true potential. Try Analemma water and revolutionize your life. Visit coherent-water.com. Every purchase comes with a 100% money-back guarantee. You can literally taste the difference risk-free. Go to coherent-water.com. Don't forget to put in the code GENIUS10 to get some money off. Join the water revolution. Again, go to coherent-water.com and put in the code GENIUS10 for a discount. Okay, is this a scalable process or is it more bench scale right now? Like what would it need to be able to scale up large?
Scale. We were getting reasonable, but so detectable, but fairly low on industrial scales titers. So we were getting less than 1 millimole of vanillin produced when we did this. So before we scale up, we're doing a lot of optimization work to try and increase the titer that we are getting. And we're doing that in collaboration with an industrial partner.
So you bring in more chemical engineering people to scale it up from the bench, but your bailiwick is getting the bench process working, is that right?
That's exactly right. I think before we start thinking about scaling up, we really need to get those titers up well above 1 millimole, which is where we are currently, to something approaching grams per litre. And once we're at that level, then we could start thinking about scaling that we are investigating. But at the moment, we do more synthetic biology and bioengineering to really improve this strain as much as possible.
Right. What would this look like if it's successfully scaled up? What do you imagine it would be?
I can imagine a process where we have waste streams coming from either industrial or household waste, which contains PET. I don't know about it in the US, but in the UK, we've already got quite efficient systems for sorting plastic waste, and in particular, PET waste is quite easily recoverable. So we know that PET can be quite efficiently hydrolyzed using just sodium hydroxide into terephthalic acid and ethylene glycol. So we could use a chemical or an enzymatic process to depolymerize it into terephthalic acid. And so we're going to be in a situation where we have large volumes of terephthalic acid. This would be the input into a bioreactor. We would have a microbial process, and at that point we would need to do transient processing, which I envisage being some sort of extraction into organic solvent, which would give us our final product. It's worth noting that vanillin is actually the most hydrophobic part of this pathway, so it provides inherently quite a nice way to separate it from the other molecules. Because it is more hydrophobic, you can make the most of that in your extraction processes and selectively extract it over any other sort of unwanted intermediates.
I mean, if you don't have a clean feed stock, though, if you have, let's say, I don't know, in bottles and has plasticizers and hundreds of other ancillary chemicals, how are you supposed to do this on how are you supposed to work with a feedstock that's like unbelievably complicated chemically? I
mean, you say unbelievably complicated. You're quite right. There are other molecules in there, so there's plasticizers and colorants, etc. By mass, the vast majority will be terephthalic acid and ethylene glycol, because the other molecules are there in much lower levels than the terephthalic acid and ethylene glycol. What we need to do as part of the development process is characterize the effect of those other molecules, so the plasticizers, etc. We need to characterize the effect of those on the strain. But at the moment, we haven't observed any sort of adverse reactivity, and I believe that they're there in very, very low levels. So I don't think that it will cause a problem to the process, and it will just be a case of having to purify the product at the end. But any chemical process, you have impurities, right? This is something that has been the case in chemical processes for many decades. You have a major product, and then you have a series of minor products which you have to purify away from. And so doing that as part of a bioprocess, I don't really think is very different from doing it from a chemical process, which is already a very well-established process at scale for many chemical compounds, including vanillin.
Yeah, but this is an engineered process, and these bacteria are not used to, the feedstock they're getting. I mean, if they have a natural feedstock, yes, I'm sure there's a lot of ancillary chemicals, organic acids, things like that. But in a man-made construct like this, with, again, potentially thousands of different man-made chemicals put in there, not for, let's say evolutionary success, but just put in there for other reasons, plasticizers, colorizers, you're seeing no problems with the bacteria being affected. I'm just surprised, happily, but I'm surprised.
Well, not yet. I mean, it's not something we've studied in great detail, but, the process works, and we have already seen, since publishing our paper, we've already seen ways in which we can increase the titers. So these things aren't stopped. They're not shutting the process down, and we still see that there's room for improvement. So I really, at the moment, I'm quite optimistic that they won't cause, like a no-go bottleneck for us. And I really do believe that they are not present in sufficient quantities to cause a significant issue for us. And I think they will just be purified out at the end of the process and downstream processing.
Well, when are you going to be in a testing phase for that? Where you're going to take, let's say, plastic bottles that have the labels on them and things like that? Or I don't know if you'd have to strip the labels off.
That is the happen. Yeah, I think we would strip the labels off.
So you probably have to strip the labels off, maybe take the caps off. Maybe the cap is a different plastic.
Yeah, but as well as plastic bottles, there are also many other industrial waste streams, which are predominantly PET, that we have identified as well. So plastic bottles is one of them, but PET is quite ubiquitous across a lot of industries. And some forms are purer than others. And we are collaborating with a number of partners at the moment to look at some of those different waste streams. Unfortunately, I can't give you all details on that, but there are many sources of PET which are in quite a clean form, which we can investigate, and we are actively investigating.
Well, what are some of the largest volumes of PET? Are they bottles, or are they some other product? Like, can you say that?
By volume, I think it probably is plastic bottles, or food packaging at least, which encompasses plastic bottles, but also other food packaging, say biscuit trays and fruit trays and things like this. That's all PET. And by volume, that is the largest. But it's also it's a compromise between not just the largest thing of PET, but also the most easy to process. And there are very large volumes of PET being produced from industrial processes which are very clean and would be very well suited to this process. So if we look at how much vanilla we actually need to produce to meet global demand, that might be achievable with not perhaps the largest waste stream, but an accessible and clean waste stream that we have access to.
Well, that's good. So if you need to, you can pick and choose and pick a cleaner stream that is more likely to work right off the bat.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Would it be a waste stream that's literally about to be released from a plastic plant, or would it happen right at the plant, or would it happen later on when, some of these materials are in product form and they're gathered up and then recycled?
Yeah, I think a couple of examples that I'm thinking of, it's very much, one industrial process happens, and then as a byproduct of that, we have a lot of PET left over. And at that point, they've literally at the moment it's going to landfill, it's just being buried. And at that point, you can just divert it away from that landfill direction and put it into this process. So there's a lot of opportunity. But I think what needs to happen now, not just in my own work, but in this field more generally, is industry needs to be very open about what waste streams that they have, so that people such as myself and other academics and industries working in the field of upcycling can find the opportunities and really, make the most of these technologies to actually have real world impact.
Is there a problem there? If someone gets PET and they make it into product A and someone makes it into product B, I mean, at that point, it would be essentially a proprietary process maybe for that plant. And then if you go in there and you want to handle their material they normally throw away with the acidity, well, it's already been processed in a proprietary way, so we need you to sign a non-disclosure, and we can't make this a public process. You can only do it for us. Would you run into that issue?
It's not an issue we've come up against so far. So the companies that we've interacted with so far have been just very enthusiastic for us to do something with a waste stream, because a lot of companies have quite ambitious sustainability goals, and they have quite a strong vested interest in cooperating with people who have these kind of enabling technologies to really improve their sustainability metrics. So most of the companies that we've interacted with have been very keen for us to take their waste streams and do something useful with them.
Okay. That's good. So you used E. coli for one. What other, fungi or bacteria or other creatures are you looking to use for other processes?
At the moment, all of our work has been in E. coli, and this is because it's very easy to work with. It's quick to grow. It's very genetically tractable. It's a system that we've worked with a lot, and we're quite familiar with it, so we can generate these pathways pretty quickly. Having said that, in the future, we are looking towards moving into Pseudomonas, for example, Pseudomonas putida, and this is quite well established within the field. So some other groups across the world have demonstrated upcycling of PET using Pseudomonas strains. And in comparison to E. coli, they can withstand higher concentrations of things like organic solvents and actually the vanillin itself as well. So they are more tolerant towards vanillin, which is actually a antimicrobial agent. So we are interested in looking towards Pseudomonas. I'm also aware of some groups who are interested in using, for example, Iginella sacchiensis, which is the strain which makes PETase, this famous enzyme which degrades plastic. And we are interested to see whether we can integrate that with our strain to have a sort of co-culture type situation where you would be simultaneously degrading and upcycling the plastic.
So what are some of the considerations when you're choosing the chassis or the organism that you're going to modify?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the first thing I would think about is the chemical compatibility. So I mentioned at the very beginning that we had to choose a strain which wouldn't reduce the vanillin to the alcohol, and that's because a lot of strains and microbes have these reductases which are quite promiscuous and will just reduce a lot of aldehydes, and that's an anti-toxicity measure because aldehydes are toxic. So these reductases are kind of a survival technique. So one of the first things I think is my product going to be stable in this strain, and how much engineering will I have to do to make the strain compatible with the product that I want to make? And another thing is thinking, okay, if I've done that, how toxic are the chemicals that I want to use? How toxic are they to the strain? So another advantage of Pseudomonas is that it is much more tolerant. You can have much higher levels of these chemicals. So that makes it really attractive. The other thing you might want to think about is, are they safe to use? So if we're starting to think about scalable industrial processes, these microbes safe to use at scale? Are we going to have to do, crazy GM risk assessments, or are they actually generally regarded as safe? So we tend to work with strains which are quite well established in biotech and are not going to cause any sort of safety concerns at all. And the other thing is the rate of growth. So we want something which can grow very quickly, is pretty metabolically active and quite easy to handle and quite reliable. And again, Pseudomonas putida and E. coli tick all of those boxes. And so they are very, very popular for those reasons.
So once you get a process going, do you have to run it forever, continuously? Or, I guess you don't do batch processes, or if you do all the E. coli die and then they get cultured again? Like, how does this actually work in practice?
There's loads of different ways that you can do it. The common process is to do batch, so that you would have, the way that we initially did it was in batch using resuspended cells. So we actually first expressed all these enzymes in a cell. So we had a rich broth full of cells. We then sort of centrifuged it, so we just get the cell pellet. We resuspended that to a very high optical density, so a lot of cells at a smaller volume, and use that as our biocatalyst. And that was a batch process. And then at the end of it, you extract out your product and you get a better thing for a scalable industrial process. Probably would be something that's a bit more like a fermentation, and you can have a continuous feeding of fermentations as well. And from this way, you can really accumulate quite high titers. This works quite well if you have some in situ product removal as well, because again, as I mentioned, vanillin is toxic. So if you can be removing vanillin as you're making it, you're going to enable higher overall yields because you're alleviating this toxicity as it's made. So we actually showed in our work that if you add in some solvent overlays, you can selectively accumulate vanillin in the solvent overlay and actually get a higher titer. So I think for a continuous process, that would be a very good option. And then it's also easier for downstream processing because your product is already in a different phase, which is then easy to separate from your cells.
Well, do you think you can do a continuous process? Would new E. coli continually be born and other ones dying in the mixture? And how would would they create toxic byproducts, or what would happen when the E. coli die in significant numbers in the mixture?
Yeah, it can't be continuous forever. It would be we'd have to do studies to find out the optimum running time for such a process. It wouldn't, be continuously growing because you're right, a lot of the E. coli would eventually die and you would have a lot of redundant cell matter. But I think you could have a process which was running certainly for days. I think it would be sensible in the first instance to try and accumulate as much product as possible.
But what do you do with the waste material, the unconverted product, and the dead E. coli, and whatever detritus that accumulates, if any? What do you do with that?
at the moment, we don't have a solution for that. This is at a very early stage, this work. I would love to eventually have some kind of system where we can treat that with something and it could become a feedstock, because cell debris it's a very rich, carbon-rich medium, right? And I think there has been some initial thought as to whether that itself, if you were to hydrolyze it and kill it and sort of lyophilize it, could that actually then be used as some sort of growth media? I would love to have time to study that, and it's very much on the list, but at the moment we do just sadly decontaminate and dispose of the waste cell material.
Where does it go? Like, what happens to it?
It gets incinerated, I think, eventually, but that's the academic scale. I don't know about industrial scale, what happens to it.
How close are you to getting a pilot process going in a particular plant?
We're still quite a long way off, if I'm honest. As I said, we're very much at laboratory scale. I mean, like just a few milliliters at the moment. And there's a lot of strain engineering that we want to do first before we start thinking about scaling up. So I think we're quite a few years off, of scaling up at the moment.
Well, if you're doing, let's say you do something successful at the laboratory level, the bench scale level, you're optimizing the strains, to whatever point you want to get the right titers, as you said. But then when you go to scale it up, they're over-optimized, let's say. Or there's other factors now that you have a huge mass of material that creates, let's say, pockets of toxicity in the reactor. How are you going to account for that? Like, how do you know that you can scale up to the large process? And I would guess you need to go back and forth, right?
Yeah, we don't know. And that's why you scale up gradually. We wouldn't go straight to a 100-liter reactor vessel. You go up incrementally. So we'd go to 5 liters and then 20 liters, or, going that in small steps. And hopefully in doing that, we would see these problems along the way. And at that point, it's easier to go back down a level and do further tweaks to your process so that you don't jump up to a huge process and then find loads of problems. Because, things do change when you scale up. And we would do that in collaboration with, scale up facilities that we have in Scotland. And they have a lot of expertise to help academics transition these kind of programs.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know that's how the scale up process works. You go slightly larger. Until you get to where you need to go. So, I don't know, just as a guess, how many steps on average would there be from the bench scale to industrial scale?
Steps in terms of different size cultures?
Yeah, right, scaling steps. Like, what would be your guess on how many stages or steps there would be to get to the industrial size?
I mean, I guess it depends what your industrial size is. I would imagine, somewhere between 8 and 10. That would be a very rough estimate.
Well, it sounds like that's, I don't know, what that would probably be on the chemical engineering side of the equation. They would be more experts in that. I just wonder. I have no idea to know something like that.
Kind of saying I used to actually work in a process chemistry department, so I've kind of seen this from the chemical perspective, but I've not seen it from the biotechnological side. So I don't know whether that's a sensible estimate from a biotechnological standpoint. And I would certainly, I think there's a big leap between going, even if you're in a 50-liter fermenter, that's very different. Some of these huge pilot plants that you see. And it would very much depend on what our end goal was and the kind of scale at which we want to produce this plastic-derived vanillin. It's quite interesting because vanillin is a consumer product. It goes into a lot of consumer things. There needs to be a consumer market for it as well for the scale up to be economically feasible. And so something that we're looking at the moment is whether there is space in the market for something like this, that it's just derived from plastic. Because there's a lot of consumer concern, I think, over the concept of something being plastic derived. Because I think there is a sort of lack of appreciation for the fact that once you have produced a molecule, it is actually chemically indistinguishable. No matter where it's from, it's the same molecule. But the consumer still has this idea of something being natural and therefore that's better. And so I think before we start making this stuff on multi-ton scale, we actually need to establish what is the consumer demand and then tailor the production scale to that demand.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine you in the future, you're on the cover of a magazine and you've got your arm around this big reactor and you're proudly displaying that you've scaled it up to this huge thing, So I hope that's the future for you. I mean, if the process works.
I hope so too. That sounds very fun.
Well, excellent. So, Joanna, what's the best way for people to find out more about your work and keep tabs? Where can they go to see what you're doing?
Yeah, so you can check out our Twitter at josadler10, and there's also at Sadler Lab, which is our Twitter. I have a website, sadlerlab.github.io, which we try to keep up to date. We also have pages on the University of Edinburgh website as well. Watch this space because we're actively developing new pathways now and new enzymes to do things with plastic waste. So it's a really exciting time for our lab, and I'm really excited to see where our research goes in the next 5 years.
Okay. And the last question, Sadler, is Sadler?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Going to make sure for listeners. Well, Joanna, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Are you ready to unlock the true potential of your body and mind? Introducing Analemma Coherent Water, a revolutionary new way to improve your health and well-being. Analemma has been clinically proven to significantly increase ATP levels. These are the mitochondrial energy of your body. It significantly improves your gut health by improving the state of your microbiome and provides up to 12 years of biological age rejuvenation within 3 months of drinking this water. Imagine having more energy, a healthier gut, a clearer mind, and a youthful body. With Analemma water, it all stops being a dream. Take the first step towards unlocking your true potential. Try Analemma water and revolutionize your life. Visit coherent-water.com. Every purchase comes with a 100% money-back guarantee. You can literally taste the difference risk-free. Go to coherent-water.com. Don't forget to put in the code GENIUS10 to get some money off. Join the water revolution. Again, go to coherent-water.com and put in the code GENIUS10 for a discount.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.